旨在反制菲律宾方面非法登礁等侵权挑衅活动。
We are considering an appropriate action if needed on this, but we will consult, of course, the various agencies. Nothing at the moment, but certainly it's a possibility, and we're considering all these options.
With revived tension over at Sandy Cay, those sandbars just 3 nautical miles away from our Pag-asa Island recently became a site of symbolic photo ops for both China and the Philippines.
The red flag is raised, and Sandy Cay is ours, declared a Chinese Coast Guard officer, his voice crackling over the radio as the banner of China unfurled against the endless blue of the South China Sea. In that single, symbolic act, captured for the world in state media photographs, Beijing didn't just plant a flag on a mere patch of sand. It planted a direct challenge to Manila, ASEAN, and Washington alike. Sandy Cay, a speck of reef barely 200 square meters in size, lies just 3 kilometers from the Philippine-held Pag-asa Island, home to a small civilian community and critical military installations. Its modest size belies its seismic significance. By seizing Sandy Cay, China has fired a warning shot across the South China Sea. Not through missiles, but through a calculated act of occupation, masked as routine environmental stewardship. This is no bureaucratic misstep or overzealous patrol. It is a deliberate escalation, testing the political resolve of the Philippines, the unity of ASEAN, and the credibility of America's security commitments, all at a time of rising global tensions. A tiny reef, a raised flag, and the brewing storm that now threatens to engulf one of the world's most contested waters. In the swirling contest over the South China Sea, geography is everything, and Sandy Cay sits at the heart of a potential storm. Nestled within the hotly contested Spratly Islands, Sandy Cay lies a mere 3 kilometers from Pag-asa Island, known internationally as Thitu Island, a key Philippine military outpost fortified with an airstrip, defensive positions, and home to around 250 Filipino civilians. The reef's proximity to Philippine-held territory is no accident. It places Chinese forces dangerously close to Manila's established presence, amplifying tensions to a new, volatile level. For years, the Philippines had quietly maintained a monitoring presence around Sandy Cay, with Coast Guard patrols and naval missions occasionally surveying the reef to assert Manila's claim. But these efforts have been repeatedly frustrated, as Chinese Coast Guard vessels, larger, better equipped, and often operating in swarms, aggressively blocked Philippine ships from approaching, issuing stern radio warnings to withdraw. Sandy Cay, once a routine waypoint in Philippine patrol routes, has now become the front line of a creeping maritime siege, where every meter matters and every maneuver carries the weight of national sovereignty. Beijing's explanation for its occupation of Sandy Cay is wrapped in the language of environmental stewardship. According to Chinese state media, including the nationalist Global Times, the Coast Guard's actions were nothing more than an inspection and cleanup operation, collecting plastic waste, clearing debris, and restoring the natural environment.
我们在铁心礁海域的相关站位呢，也发现了渔网、鱼线等人为弃之物。部分呢是带有菲律宾的文字，部分呢带有产自菲律宾的标识。
On paper, it sounds almost benign, even responsible. But to Manila and regional analysts, this narrative rings hollow. They see a familiar and alarming pattern. China's so-called soft starts. Benign activities like cleanups or scientific research have often served as the first moves towards something much more serious: land reclamation, infrastructure buildup, and eventual militarization. Similar operations prefaced the dramatic transformation of Fiery Cross Reef and Mischief Reef into fortified military bases in the past decade. Adding further tension, Chinese media outlets have framed Philippine activities near Sandy Cay, including routine Coast Guard patrols and environmental monitoring missions, as illegal intrusions, turning the victim into the provocateur in the court of global opinion. To many observers, Beijing's cleanup mission is not a gesture of goodwill. It is a textbook example of gray zone strategy, designed to secure strategic advantage without firing a shot. What's unfolding at Sandy Cay isn't happening in a vacuum. It's part of a broader, years-long playbook. Between 2013 and 2016, China launched one of the most aggressive maritime expansion campaigns in modern history, turning remote reefs, like Fiery Cross, Subi, into sprawling military fortresses. Through colossal dredging operations, Beijing moved mountains of sand and coral, building up runways capable of handling bombers, hardened radar and communication arrays, anti-aircraft missile systems, and naval ports deep enough for warships. This artificial island-building blitz reshaped the South China Sea's geography, and with it, the region's balance of power. Once open waters are now home to fortified outposts, allowing China to project military force hundreds of miles from its shores. Today, these bases sit astride some of the world's busiest commercial sea lanes, giving Beijing a powerful tool to monitor, influence, or even choke off trade routes linking East Asia, the Middle East, Africa, and Europe. Sandy Cay may be small, just 200 square meters, but for those watching closely, it signals that China's slow, relentless push to dominate the South China Sea is far from over. In 2016, the Philippines scored a historic victory at the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague, when the tribunal overwhelmingly ruled that China's sweeping claims in the South China Sea, based on its so-called nine-dash line, had no legal basis under international law. The court declared that China's historic rights argument was incompatible with the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. UNCLOS. The ruling also condemned China's massive island-building activities, citing the severe environmental destruction inflicted on fragile coral reefs and marine ecosystems. Yet, despite the legal defeat, Beijing responded with outright defiance. China rejected the tribunal's authority, dismissed the ruling as null and void, and doubled down on its maritime ambitions. Instead of compliance came consolidation, with Chinese Coast Guard, maritime militia, and military forces continuing to tighten their de facto control over disputed waters. In the years since, the Hague verdict has remained a moral and diplomatic tool for critics, but has done little to slow China's determined march across the South China Sea. Rather than relying solely on its navy, China has perfected a subtler but highly effective strategy: gray zone warfare. In this playbook, Coast Guard vessels and maritime militia, civilian boats with military ties, are deployed to assert control, allowing Beijing to advance its territorial claims without triggering a full-scale war. By avoiding direct military confrontation, China exploits the gaps between peace and open conflict, wearing down rival claimants politically, legally, and psychologically.
铁线礁是中国南沙群岛的一部分，是无人岛礁。中方依法开展维权执法活动，旨在反制菲律宾方面非法登礁等侵权挑衅活动，坚定维护国家领土主权，确保铁线礁维持无人无设施状态，坚定维护南海各方行为宣言的严肃性。
The situation at Sandy Cay is a textbook example. Instead of sending warships, China dispatched Coast Guard units under the guise of environmental patrols. The goal wasn't just to raise a flag, it was to challenge Manila's political will, dare ASEAN to respond, and test how far Washington's Mutual Defense Treaty commitments truly extend.
There's a long line of countries in the past who've attempted to test U.S. resolve. We are resolved at this time, at this moment, to work with our partners, to reestablish the warrior ethos, to rebuild our military and reestablish deterrence, and come alongside our allies and partners, first and foremost, in this region.
Through occupation without combat, Beijing signals that it can reshape facts on the water faster than international law or diplomacy can react. A slow squeeze that raises the stakes without firing a shot. Caught between defending its sovereignty and avoiding a dangerous escalation, Manila faces a precarious balancing act. Every move is fraught with risk. An aggressive pushback could ignite a wider confrontation, while passivity could invite further Chinese encroachments. So far, the Marcos administration has held back from issuing a formal diplomatic protest, a decision regional analysts interpret as strategic caution, buying time to weigh options without giving Beijing a pretext for harsher actions.
We're here to debunk that and to assure the public that we have not lost the Pag-asa case, and we continue to monitor, and until today, there is no seizure or illegal occupation of those cases.
Yet beneath the surface, alarm bells are ringing. Senior Filipino maritime security officials, speaking on condition of anonymity, warn that Sandy Cay's seizure is likely only the opening act. Without a firm response, they predict a sharp rise in harassment of Philippine operations at nearby Pag-asa Island, the nation's largest outpost in the Spratlys. In this high-stakes chess match, every hesitation risks emboldening Beijing, while every counter-move risks lighting a match in a region already soaked in gasoline. Standing at the crossroads of principle and pragmatism, Manila now faces a perilous tightrope walk. How to defend its sovereign claims without spiraling into a confrontation it cannot win alone. The Marcos administration has, for now, withheld an official diplomatic protest, a move regional observers interpret as strategic caution, a deliberate attempt to avoid giving Beijing ammunition for further escalation while quietly strengthening its position behind the scenes. However, internal warnings are growing louder. Filipino maritime security officials, speaking off the record, caution that the occupation of Sandy Cay could mark the beginning of a wider campaign of harassment against Philippine positions, especially at Pag-asa Island, just 3 kilometers away. The message is clear. Failure to respond decisively could embolden Beijing to escalate pressure not only around Sandy Cay, but across the entire Spratly chain. In a battle where control is asserted inch by inch, even silence can be dangerous. As the red flag rose over Sandy Cay, US and Philippine forces were already gearing up for their largest ever joint military exercise, Balikatan 2025, a chilling coincidence that blurs the line between drills and real-world confrontation. The exercise, sprawling across multiple Philippine islands, focuses sharply on coastal defense operations and amphibious island retaking, precisely the kind of scenarios now unfolding around Sandy Cay. In the eyes of Beijing, the timing was no accident. China's move serves as a bold strategic message, testing not only Manila's resolve, but the credibility of Washington's security guarantees under the 1951 Mutual Defense Treaty. For Washington and Manila alike, the Sandy Cay occupation transforms Balikatan from a theoretical rehearsal into a litmus test of political will, and possibly a preview of tougher choices ahead. The seizure of Sandy Cay sends shockwaves far beyond Manila's immediate concerns, drawing in regional and global players alike. ASEAN nations will likely split along diverging lines. Some will tread carefully, avoiding confrontation with Beijing, while others, particularly Vietnam and Malaysia, will express alarm at yet another attempt to redraw the maritime map of Southeast Asia. These divisions within ASEAN could weaken the bloc's collective stance against Chinese expansion, emboldening Beijing in its push for dominance across the South China Sea. For the United States, the stakes are equally high. The Sandy Cay incident underscores a rising pattern of Chinese assertiveness, not only in the South China Sea, but also across Asia, from the Taiwan Strait to the East China Sea. Washington's ability to reassure allies, especially in the Philippines, will be crucial to its credibility in maintaining its regional security presence. The credibility of U.S. security commitments, highlighted by the Mutual Defense Treaty, will be tested more harshly than ever before. Finally, the risk of escalation cannot be overstated. What seems like a minor flashpoint today, the hoisting of a flag over a small reef, could easily ignite a much wider military confrontation. As tensions rise, even small provocations could cascade into something far more dangerous, threatening not only regional stability, but also global trade routes and security. The seizure of Sandy Cay is no mere territorial grab. It is a deliberate, calculated escalation in a long-running strategy that seeks to shift the balance of power in the South China Sea. What appears to be a small reef is, in reality, a dangerous flashpoint, part of a larger pattern of assertive Chinese moves that chip away at regional stability. The outlook is grim. As China continues to expand its footprint in the South China Sea, expect rising tensions, sharper diplomatic clashes, and the deeper militarization of the region. The delicate balance of power is increasingly at risk, with the Philippines and its allies caught between defending sovereignty and avoiding an all-out conflict. In today's strategic environment, even 200 square meters of sand, a seemingly insignificant speck of land, can dramatically alter the course of global power dynamics. The stakes are high, and the implications are far-reaching. This small reef may be the key to unlocking a much larger geopolitical storm. In the game of global power, even the smallest move can shift the tide. Thank you for tuning in to our channel. If you enjoyed the video, please remember to like, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth analysis of global issues.